I'm Matt with MovieWeb. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I apologize for this paranormal incident,
Ah,
which sucked my
hey,
voice from my lungs.
there you go.
Good to see you. Good to meet you.
Likewise, I love both of your work. What you've done with the true crime genre, just the way you've subverted it. Joshua is so interesting. And Mark, I mean, you've changed my life and the lives of many others. So it's great to speak with both of
Thanks, Matt.
you. Yeah, however, don't associate either of you with conspiracies or the supernatural. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what is it about those elements that you think might jive with this humanistic approach and be a good entry point for something bigger about community and regular people?
I mean, there was a sort of organic unfolding of this show that sprung out of Sasquatch, the documentary series that we made together. And I remember one of the first things Josh told me when he was pitching me the Sasquatch series was, we're gonna have to figure out who the monster is. Is it Sasquatch or is it the people? And it was very simple, but it really stuck with me. And we carried that as a little bit of a North Star through the making of that show. And when the show came out, what accidentally happened is it tapped into a whole community that you're talking about, of conspiracy theorists that Josh and I, were not really a part of. And all these stories kept coming at us, and we said, oh my God, there might be more to tell here. So then we had to ask ourselves the question, which is a very important question to ask, is what's the reason to make this other than just to cash a check, right? Like, how can this be important? How can this belong to our culture, And I think that, the answer is a many layered, many faceted answer. But for me, the core of it was if we could tell a story with a really interesting creature, lore, and cryptid, and tie some of that lore to the human aspect and find a new human story that hadn't been told yet, and take these sort of ancient myths and parlay that in a way that could be slightly illuminative and something that's happening in our culture right now. That was like the goal. And I'm not saying we nailed that on each episode, but keeping that as something that we were striving towards made this type of genre show something that I think, at least for me, fit into the lane that I feel like I have something to offer in.
And Joshua, I know you've done several great things before this and Sasquatch, but what was it maybe with Sasquatch and this that with the supernatural element you thought like, oh, I can tie this into something bigger about these individuals, these communities, these ideas?
Yeah, I mean, with every subsequent conversation that Mark and I and the rest of the team had, it felt like we were discussing a different facet of humanity and or a brokenness within that facet of humanity. Grief, socioeconomic hardship. I mean, there was just we just sort of kept going down the line, and every story that we found that really compelled us and we felt reached the bar that we had decided was the bar that needed to be hit and met every time. It was just it was a new door was opening, and so that was really it. It was just it became about the pursuit of that, and then eventually it was there was eight stories that we thought were just they were deep and they were human and but they were also strange and creepy in the way that you want these things to be as well. At the end of the day, it is for an audience, and so we we felt like we needed to be human, but we also we want to fulfill what we would want as viewers out of a genre piece.
I thought those elements, the supernatural elements, were a wonderful invitation to empathy, a beautiful opportunity to explore something you wouldn't have normally. But were you ever worried that people who were like believers would be ticked off that it's more than just ancient aliens, something like that.
You're never going to make everybody happy, and that's you sort of. I mean, you're either met with that or you accept that before you make something. And but if you can stomach that, which personally I can, then you end up meeting people who in this instance are believers who are actually grateful that you're taking the conversation into a place that maybe even they didn't expect. And you're illuminating something for them that they didn't see. And vice versa for us as the filmmakers. And so I really think that on each episode we ended up finding that sort of sweet spot around exactly that.
Yeah, I don't know how people are going to respond to this. I'm excited to see what happens. But if you look at Sasquatch and the central crime at the center of that is a comp, right? And you think, okay, so there's this murder in the middle of the woods, these bodies have been torn limb from limb. Is that Sasquatch that did that? Okay, maybe. Is that maybe someone who wants it to look like Sasquatch did it so that they can instill fear and control people? Maybe. Is that a person who did it and has to convince themselves that Sasquatch did it because they can't deal with the trauma and guilt of having done that? All of those answers are equally fascinating to me and live within the realm of a story worth telling and worth pursuing. So I'm hopeful that people are open to looking at these things from different angles.
Yeah, and I love that it manages to do that subjective sort of overview without being incoherent at all or biased or anything. It's exceptional. And I'm curious. So you're making Sasquatch. Hulu says, "Hey, yeah, do more if you have an idea for a bunch of things." Meanwhile, Mark, Room 104 has ended. I think it's the last thing you directed. It was a great outlet for different ideas, things like that, an anthology. So out there, could this be possibly something multi-season where you could pour into it that sort of miniature storage, short storytelling feeling you had for Room 104?
I would love it. I think we would love it. I mean, listen, we definitely have more stories that are worth exploring and more stories than we had room to tell in this season. I think that, there's no one size fits all approach to making television like this, or at least to making interesting television. But we did learn a lot in the process about what elements do make for a great jumping off point. And I think what's so exciting about a show like this, particularly at this stage in my life, is that you can't control a lot of what's going to happen here. It's a chase, right? You start with a really great subject. You start with a really great human subject, and then there are these twists and turns that happen, and you have to figure out how to make that episode work within it. So that's a really good recipe to stay alive and vital as an artist as well. So I'm hopeful we get to make 10 more seasons of this.
Are you game, Joshua?
100%. And I love that you referred to them as short stories. It's one of the things I kept, when you're a kid and you go to the book fair, and every book fair I would get whatever was that year's edition of, scary stories to tell in the dark. And just these little snippets that, it's unbelievable what you can do in 45 minutes to an hour, that can, you can leave the audience with something that they can then actually go and dive into on their own. And I love the idea of being able to do more of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. I could discuss this for a while, but I have to cut. I'm looking forward to, Penelope, Mark Duplass. This is going to be great. Reviews up tomorrow. And Joshua, I don't know if it's happening, but Vampires of Gem City looks incredible. I don't know what the future is.
A rumored project that actually is not going. Yeah.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
well,
but
this is
I have
real,
something
and
out
it's
next year that I'm working on, but
okay. Well,
right
this
now
is
it's all
real,
out.
and it's excellent, and both of you are too. So thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Matt.
Great to meet
Have
you.
a good one.